Hello there, and welcome to yet another video. This one is called Chains of Inheritance, and no, it's not about BDSM. It's about yet another idea that we can leverage in object-oriented programming, and in particular this idea of inheritance that we've been talking about. And here, it's something that you may have kind of already intuited or even figured out on your own. It's that we don't have to stop at just one level of inheritance, right? So if we're thinking about our traffic example, where we have a vehicle class, and then I have like a car class that extends the vehicle class, that's one level of inheritance, right? The car is a kind of vehicle. You don't have to stop there. You could have something that extends the car, right? So you could have a sports car that extends the car while the car extends the vehicle. And in that case, the sports car is both a sports car, which is what it is, but it's also a kind of car because it extends that class, and it's also a kind of vehicle because the car class extends the vehicle class. So we have this chain of inheritance that goes backwards from sports car up to car and up to vehicle at the very top of the chain. And there's nothing stopping us from having longer chains than that as well. But let's work with that example and integrate it into our code to see what it looks like. It's not gonna shock you because it is kind of what you might expect. Nonetheless, let's look at how we would do it. So back in our wonderful simulation, we've got our cars and motorcycles all jumping into this vehicles array. And we're moving them around and displaying them, and we've got drunk cars, and everything's going great. So it currently looks like this, right? Swerving red cars. There's also the yellow motorcycles. The cars are super drunk. But let's decide that I also want to extend on the cars, which are kinds of vehicles, and I want to make this sports car, right? It's going to be a drunk sports car because cars are, by definition, in this simulation world that I have perhaps foolishly created, all cars are drunk, and if sports cars extend or inherit from standard cars, then sports cars too are going to be drunk. So this is probably a terrible idea already, but let's do it. Let's make a sports car. So how do we make a new class? Well, we need a new file, of course. So I'm going to have to do the old new file option over here. Don't know why that's A, that seems silly. Anyway, and it's going to be called sports car. Because sports car is two words, you will notice I'm starting with a big S, and then I also have a big C, capital C for sports car. That's just following the conventions. Again, I'm going to start my class by saying class sports car. Now, my sports car is going to be a kind of vehicle, obviously, but it's also a kind of car. And when we're extending and thinking about chains of inheritance, we always want to think about the more specific thing to extend. So a sports car is going to extend the car class. It's going to have all of the things that a car can do, but we're going to add on something specifically sporty because that's cool. So what do we need in our new class? Perhaps the first thing that we need is to add it to index.html. Now, we have a decision here as to where to put our sports car. The most important thing is that because it extends the car class, it's a kind of car, we need our sports car to come after car in the list here. So sports car can go here. We're going to add our sports car file after the car file, just like we added the car file after the vehicle file, because they depend on one another. So in defining a sports car, we know that we need a constructor. We're not going to get fancy. It's going to be the same kind of constructor that we've been using. Takes an X and a Y. And again, because we're now using inheritance, the first thing we should be thinking about doing is calling the superclass constructor, which would be the car constructor. So we write super, and then what parameters does the car need? It needs an X and a Y. So we're just going to pass those along to the car. Done. Now, is there anything else special about a sports car that we want to set up in its properties? Arguably, I would say that a sports car should be faster than a regular car. So for that reason, we should set its x velocity to be a larger number. Let's say 15. Moves at 15 pixels per second. 15 pixels per frame, I should say. It's a very, very fast car. Imagine if people talked about cars in terms of their pixels per frame. But they don't, and they never will. So let's not worry about that. So a sports car is a kind of car. It has all of the car stuff, so we call the car constructor with the x and the y. But it's got one little extra thing, which is that it's much faster. To make our sports car a little more interesting, let's also override, remember overriding methods, the display method, so that we don't use the cars display method by default. We're going to have a specific way of displaying a sports car. Now, to do that, we are going to, first of all, we're going to want to display just a regular car. This is the way that I'm going to think about this. So the first thing is let's just draw a regular car, and we can do that by calling the display method, without that S, the display method of the superclass, which is a car. So we know that that will draw a red rectangle. That's what a car looks like. So a sports car is going to look like a car with a little bit of extra pizzazz to it. So our first step is to display the car, and then let's draw something extra. Let's draw some racing stripes on this sports car, because that will look cool. So racing stripes, they're going to be yellow. That's part of our palette, and I think that that's an appropriate color for racing stripes. We know that the regular car is red, so yellow stripes will show up. To draw our stripes, I mean, I guess I'm going to use rectangles. Now we have to think about some math, unfortunately. So the racing stripes, they should be positioned. Oh, and we should use rect mode center as well. I'm sorry, I'm getting confused here. Let's set no stroke as well. And let's set rect mode center, because we want to match the way that we're drawing this with the way that the car is drawn, which also uses rect mode center. So we'll be drawing them in the center on X. That makes sense. Where do we want to draw them on Y? Well, we want to draw them we want to think sort of relative to the center of the car, but I think I want two sporty stripes going across the car. So one of them will be offset upwards from the middle of the car. There are different ways that I could do this. I could just say -5 or something, and that would be completely fine. What I might do, though, is I'm going to make it relative to the height. So I'm going to go 1/10 of the height of the car up from the middle of it to draw my stripe. And then the width of my stripe is going to be just the width of the car. It's going to go all the way along the car. And how tall should the stripe be? It's going to have to be, it should be pretty thin, so I'm going to make it 1/20 of the height of the car. And I'm going to do the same basic idea for the other stripe, except that instead of offsetting it upwards by using minus, I'm going to offset it downwards by using plus. So this is going to draw two yellow rectangles down sort of horizontally along the middle of the car, offset up and down from the center of the car, so that we get a sort of a sporty, a sporty appearance. So that's going to be it. That's what my sports car is going to do. Really, the key thing that I think is interesting here is this. It's not interesting, it's the point of this discussion. The sports car extends the car class, while the car class extends the vehicle class, right? So we're 3 deep down the chain of inheritance now. And the difference between a sports car and a regular car is it's faster, and it's got these racing stripes, which we're adding after we've done the standard car displaying technique. It remains to add some sports cars to our simulation, so let's do that. Let's see, let's add a number of sports cars. We probably don't want too many because they're fancy. So there's 3 of them. And then we've got to do the same thing down here, right? We've got to, in fact, this is so repetitive, I'm just going to copy the motorcycles and duplicate it. In fact, it would be even better to duplicate the car one because it's got some similarity in language. So we're going to duplicate that loop to create all of our sports cars. We want to count up to sportscars.num sports cars. There's 3 of them. We still want to generate random positions just because that's easy. We're going to generate something called sports car. We're going to use the sports car constructor, which we just wrote. And we're going to add the sports car that we just created to our vehicles array. So now our vehicles array has got 23 things in it, right? 10 cars, 10 motorcycles, and 3 sports cars being added over the course of these 3 loops, all to the same array. One beautiful thing now is having added our sports cars, we can just leave draw alone, right? Because a sports car is a kind of car, and a car is a kind of vehicle. So all of this stuff, again, is still guaranteed for sports cars. We don't need to change a thing. They're all just vehicles at the level of what we're doing in the draw loop. So after we've created them, the code will just run just like it did before, except with sports cars in it. Let's see how that looks. Okay, let's look at the problem. Num sports cars is not defined. That's what it's saying here on line 24. Sounds easy to fix. Saying, oh, it's listed num sports cars. Oh, it's because it's sports cars with an S, right? That was foolish of me. Sports car. It is a sports car. It's not a sport car. Yeah, okay. Perfect. Oh, goodness, they are fast. They're like almost too fast. You can sort of see them. There's a couple here. They look like they're kind of racing in traffic, which is a very dangerous thing to do when you're as drunk as they are. In a way, it almost doesn't look like they're drunk because it looks like they're kind of weaving through the traffic. So that's an interesting visual effect that I hadn't anticipated. Also weird that all of the motorcycles are hanging out down the bottom half of the canvas. But at any rate, you can see we've got these new sports cars. They're faster. They get across the screen faster. They've got their racing stripes. And they extend the car class, and we can see cars here as well. And you can see how they extend them because the sports car looks so similar because it's built upon the display code of the car. And then we've also got our motorcycles for good measure, which are racing along. They're a bit slower than the sports car. So that's the idea of chains of inheritance, right? Like you don't have to stop at one level of inheritance, like car inherits from vehicle. You can have sports car inherits from car, inherits from vehicle. And you can take this as far as you want, right? You can have a Testarossa that extends a Ferrari class, that extends a sports car class, that extends a car class, that extends a vehicle class, and you could use that to make all of these like really specific variants of one particular idea that can make your simulations or other kinds of code super interesting and varied while maintaining this kind of cohesiveness that allows you to manage what could otherwise be a very, very complicated piece of programming. So that's what it is. Chains of inheritance just means that we don't have to stop at one level. We can have arbitrarily complex chains, bearing in mind that they are just like one-to-one, right? You can't have one thing inherit from multiple classes, or at least not in a simple way. It's always one. Every subclass has one superclass, right? A superclass can have many subclasses, but every subclass has one superclass. So that's about it. We've got sports cars, which is, I think, everybody always dreamed of having a sports car, and now we've all got 3. We could splash out and have 4 if we wanted to. But that's chains of inheritance, a very useful concept in object-oriented programming. I hope you use it, and I hope you use it well. I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.